Sto versando Vaio Armaron 2015.
I'm pouring myself a glass of Vaio Armaron 2015 from the Cerego Alighieri estate that once belonged to Dante's descendants. This is one of the 10 best wines in the world according to Wine Spectator. The aging process lasted just a few months, not for long, and happened inside cherry wooden barrels. On the nose and in the mouth, you can smell and taste these bitter cherry notes. These ripe cherries perfectly blended with the scent cherry wood. It's such a great wine, so complex and layered. It has what I believe is the most important feature of the Amarone, an illusion of sweetness. When you savor it, it tastes sweet, but it's not sugary sweet. The glycerin brings a certain silky quality to it, so it's just as soft as it is velvet.
Di un soffice quasi di velluto.
Certamente Masi è un'azienda profonda.
Masi cares deeply about culture. For Masi, culture means obviously enological and wine culture. After all, the word culture comes from the Latin term for cultivate, so, it all starts with the cultivation of the land, which embodies the know-how and the identity of a territory, of the people involved in it. In the case of Masi, the bond with the land and the territory begins centuries ago, even though it was officially regulated in 1772. The date of the Boscaini's first harvest in Valpolicella Classica. And since then, the family has been carrying the legacy of wine culture up until the present day.
Questo legame con la cultura vitivinicola del territorio.
The culture of the territory is a distinctive ingredient of the Masi wines. And even though it's not indicated on the label, it's very much embedded in the Masi Award.
Il premio Masi si sviluppa.
The Masi Award is actually 3 different types of award. There's the Civiltà Veneta Award, the first edition of which was in 1981. Then there's a Civiltà del Vino Award, which is for the most important international personalities in the wine world.
E poi si è aggiunto il Grosso d'Oro Veneziano che...
And then there's a Grosso d'Oro Veneziano Award for those who advocated for peace and solidarity in the world. For each of these awards, there's a panel, a committee who selects the nominees and proclaims the winners.
Uniscono e fanno la loro selezione, dei premiati.
Since 1981, Masi has been promoting the territory, its heritage, and the most outstanding skills of the Civiltà Veneta through 3 different awards, 2 of which are international, and through a foundation. This is the story of their legacy. The legacy of a family, a company, and a wine that made the culture of time the key to their success. My name is Matteo Caccia. Welcome to The Magic of Time, 250 Years of Masi.
Il premio è stato un po' una sfida, un po'...
Well, the award was a bit of a challenge for us. You see, it was an act of pride, an act of rebellion against the system, the wine system, that is, which was predominantly an industrial system. This situation created a progressive exasperation, which, by the way, led to the methanol wine scandal. So, there always has to be some kind of incident that brings us back to the essence of our job.
All'origine del nostro mestiere.
Wine is made in the vineyard, and you have to respect the grapes, the process, and the consumers, who deserve the authenticity of local good wine. And back in the day, back in the late 70s, I had a bit of a hard time because I had studied, I knew my craft, I loved what I did. And I'd done so many interesting things like the Campo Fiorin. And yet it was so hard to be in this business. One day, I was at the Bottega del Vino, and I was discussing all of this, and Cesare Marchi said to me, "Why don't you just do something to change this situation? There are so many people from this region. They're musicians, painters, artists. Why don't you just celebrate them? Why don't you award them with the Amarone?"
E tu ti metti sul piedistallo e sai con cosa ti premi, col tuo Amarone.
In the late 70s, Sandro Boscaini started thinking about an award to celebrate the Civiltà Veneta, the people from the Veneto region. The idea came up during an encounter with a couple of friends, Veronese writer Cesare Marchi and journalist Giovanni Vicentini, who Boscaini met at the Bottega del Vino. What happened that night is recounted in Kate Singleton's book, Mr. Amarone. That evening, he found himself telling his friends about his perception of being Venetian. Traveling throughout Europe, the USA, and Japan had made him aware of how small and indeed insignificant the Veneto was in many people's eyes. And it had come as a bit of a shock. The Veneti usually believed their provenance to be something akin to a sign of nobility, he admitted ruefully. In actual fact, we're often considered complete provincials, because for decades the region has been so poor. In the wine business, for instance, growers like myself have never enjoyed the recognition reserved for the Tuscans or the Piedmontese. In general, the Veneto is known for cheap wines, and I find this very disappointing. I'm educated, I've traveled the world, and I'm proud of my family's roots as winemakers. I'm also convinced of the great potential of our wines, but in the overall picture, something's always missing. Then why don't you seek out other Venetians who share your belief in the importance of our cultural roots and origins? Suggested his old friend, Cesare Marchi, raising his glass.
Il Veneto è una persona.
People from the Veneto region are resourceful. They travel to other countries even if they don't speak the language, and they come up with solutions to make themselves understood. They're proud of their identity and they're proud of their land, and they want to spread their culture. I believe it all started with Marco Polo, the tendency to explore, to travel, to discover the exotic, to find out more about oneself standing before a foreigner, but at the same time to be a tireless worker who lives a simple life, a fulfilling life, cherishing one's town and valuing family. I really believe, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this region perfectly embodies the notion of glocal, which is global and local at the same time, because we're open to the world, but we also enjoy the simple things of life.
E anche sa godersi la vita, perché sa vivere delle cose semplici alla fine.
Sandro Boscaini is proud to be from Veneto. He's proud of the heritage of his land, with its explorers, its merchants, its relentless workers, its people traveling all over, but at the same time cherishing their roots.
Il legame di Masi con la cultura.
The relationship between Masi and culture is deep and profound. It's the relationship between the Triveneto culture with the culture of that vast land that was once dominated by the Serenissima, the Venice Republic. Venice ruled over these lands and dominated them for over 1,000 years, for 1,100 years. And obviously, all through the years, these lands consolidated a common culture. For example, the world-renowned lions in San Marco can also be found in Dalmatia as well as in Brescia. So, you see, there's this common ground that gave rise to so many excellences worldwide. And the Masi Award and the Masi Foundation originated from there and thrived in this cultural substratum.
La Fondazione Masi e nasce il premio Masi.
I'm Cristina Valenza, and I work in Masi's Communications Office and PR.
E abbiamo inventato il premio. Eravamo nel...
And back in the 80s, we created the award. The very first edition was held on Valentine's Day in 1981. The first award we gave out was the Civiltà Veneta Award. We at Masi are part of this Civiltà Veneta, this Venetian culture, and our wine belongs to it as well. And this culture moves with the times, combining past and future. But it's also well aware of what pleasure is, you know? It expresses itself through the originality of its products.
Attraverso l'originalità.
We put together a jury, a committee of important people, mostly from the Veneto region, but also from elsewhere, like the Lombardia region. And the rest is history.
E abbiamo cominciato questa storia.
That's how the award was born. For over 40 years, it's been given out to celebrate personalities from Veneto, born, raised, or adopted. People who stood out in the fields of literature, art, journalism, science, show business, economics, and whose works helped promote the essential values of this land. The award is a barrel of Amarone, and during the ceremony, the winners are asked to sign it. Sandro Boscaini tells us why.
Me lo ricordo anch'io quando ero bambino che
It's an old tradition from when I was a kid. I remember that these buyers would show up from everywhere. Austria, Switzerland, but also Como and Milano. They'd show up to buy wine, and when they came, they'd sleep. I mean, they'd stay at an inn, but for lunch they would come over to my place. They'd play cards with my grandfather. They'd stay for 2 or 3 days. That's how business was made back then. Not on the phone like today. They would stay and they would taste each barrel. They would often try wine during the meals to see what it would taste like with food. They would choose the best wine for them, the one that they meant to eventually buy. And when they'd choose, they would sign the barrel.
una botte.
So, when we thought of a barrel as an award, I mean, we can't give out an entire barrel. We have to split up a barrel. So that it's about 150 bottles for each winner. But I thought it would be nice if the winners could sign it as a symbol, a proof that that barrel is theirs.
Di ognuno che testimonia che quella è la mia botte. C'è una bellissima storia lì.
There's this funny story from a recent ceremony. There were Ettore Sozzas and Muccioli. Sozzas signed the barrel and wrote, "I own half of this barrel." And Muccioli added, "But I own what's in it."
E quell'altro ha scritto, e io possiedo il contenuto.
In 2001, on the 20th anniversary of the Masi Award, they created the Masi Foundation.
Abbiamo detto bisogna dargli anche una strutturazione.
We decided that it was time to create some sort of structure. The award proved to be a success. We awarded many people and no one ever turned it down. We aimed higher and higher. We met high-level personalities and we always distanced ourselves from politics. You know, we wanted to keep it simple, to award good people, people who shared certain values. Essential values for the Veneto region, but also for everyone, the values of culture. So, on the 20th anniversary, we created a proper institution, a foundation. Today, the award and the foundation coexist with the support of Masi. But they are independent from each other, both in terms of operations and, you know, the foundation has its own structure. It was a joint effort with Count Pieralvise Serego Alighieri, Masi, and I myself.
Pieralvise Serego Alighieri, la Masi e io personalmente.
Besides the foundation and the Masi Award for Civiltà Veneta, there are also 2 important international awards. The Civiltà del Vino Masi Award for outstanding achievements in the wine world, and the Grosso d'Oro Veneziano Award for those who promoted culture, solidarity, and progress.
Normalmente premiamo 5 persone.
We normally award 5 people, 3 from the Veneto region, whether born or adopted, 1 international personality in the wine world, who can be involved in production, communication, marketing, or other specialities, and 1 for those, it's an international prize. It's not limited to Middle Europe. And it's to celebrate a message of culture, a culture that leads to peace, brotherhood, and solidarity.
Pace tra I popoli e amicizia tra i popoli.
It might sound a little bit old-fashioned, but now it's more important than ever for the foundation to seek out talents that try to protect the territory, to save the territory, to preserve it, to look after it. Maybe this aspect was not so clear before, but it gets more and more urgent every year.
Isabella Bossi Fedrigotti is a journalist, writer, member of a family of wine growers in Trentino, and the president of the Masi Foundation. She tells us how the nominees for the awards are selected.
There is a jury, a committee that meets periodically. They make proposals, they come up with names and they vote to select them, just as it normally happens in every jury. Although we've been fishing for many years, because I think of the jury as a fisherman who puts a fishing net out in the sea to catch different talents, we never ran out of options. Every year there are so many fish. It's actually more difficult to discard them than to find them.
Elisa, la cantante, e devo dire che...
Elisa, the singer, well, that was a highlight for us. I mean, it's not obvious to take a pop contemporary artist, a singer, into consideration, if you think about it. But it's not so strange if you realize the value of this girl. I mean, she's as fluent in Italian as she is in English. She's open to the world, but at the same time, she's from the Trieste area.
Al mondo, pur essendo veneta, triestina.
La Svetlana Alexievich, che
Svetlana Alexievich won the Masi Award in 2014. The next year, in 2015, she won the Nobel Prize for Literature. So, for us, it's a great honor to meet those extraordinary people. She introduced herself and she won us over with her sweetness. She's such a genuine woman, such a humble person, and she's so sweet and so nice. She told us of all the terrible things she witnessed in the war. You know, she's originally from Ukraine, but she lived in Belarus. She had to escape because of her ideals were at odds with Lukashenko's regime. She's basically one of the greatest storytellers, one of the best chroniclers of the events in 20th century Russia.
Dei fatti della Russia della seconda metà del XX secolo.
Un altro che mi è rimasto molto impresso.
Another one that stuck with me the most was Pierre Cardin. He was so, I must say, well, he said it himself. He said, "I have just discovered that I'm from Veneto." Because everyone thinks he's French, Pierre Cardin. But he's actually Pietro Cardin, from the Treviso. He's one of the most influential fashion designers. To receive this award must have felt like a second christening for him. Borcelli, oddly enough, he's not from Veneto, but we gave him the Civiltà del Vino Award because even if nobody knows, he's a great sommelier. He really has an aesthetic sense of wine. And he's a winemaker, along with his brother.
Ed è produttore di vino, assieme al fratello.
The list of winners in the past 40 years is very long. That goes to show how Sandro Boscaini's intuition to create a connection between wine and culture is a successful one.
For his achievements as a world-renowned conductor, for his efforts to promote the culture of music in Italy, and hopefully for a glorious rebirth, the Masi Civiltà Veneta Award goes to Andrea Battistoni.
I won the Masi Award in 2012. It was a big honor for me, and a big surprise. I was only 24. I was very young at the time.
That was Andrea Battistoni, a world-renowned musician, composer, and conductor.
The reason why I got the award was for the promotion of music among the younger generations, of classical music if you want. It was a very heartfelt commitment for me. It still is. It's something that I deeply care about and that I actually still do whenever I have a chance to. I had been to many different schools back in 2012, and I had also penned a book published by Rizzoli entitled Non è musica per vecchi. The purpose was to draw younger generations closer to the great operatic and symphonic repertoire. And so I tried to reach these generations, to connect with them through what I call concert lessons. I've been on TV shows and radio shows, and I've been trying to bring the great tradition of classical music to those people, to those listeners who are much more familiar with other genres. Because after all, the emotions and the feelings in this music are the same. Music is universal and cross-generational, and it sure can touch the hearts of young people.
Quali corde far vibrare nell'animo di questi giovani ascoltatori? Io oggi guardo a quel premio.
I consider the award that I won more like some kind of encouragement rather than a proper celebration of my achievements. I was still starting out. It was the beginning of my career. But it made me feel so important. It made me feel part of those who really count in the cultural scene. I got this prestigious acknowledgement from one of the most important companies in my town, and I stood there along with the other fellow winners. They were all outstanding personalities, great people, and I was able to meet them and talk to them so casually and informally. We were at the Philharmonic in Verona, but it felt like being at some cultural salon from long ago. That was the biggest reward for me. The fact that I was inspired to continue my work in the following years.
Jeannie Cho Lee is a Korean-American enologist, writer, and consultant. She was also the first Asian woman to win the Master of Wine Award, one of the most prestigious, high-level acknowledgements in this profession. To give you an idea, there are just a few hundred of them in the world. I spoke with her on the phone as she's spending some time in the vineyards of Burgundy, France. She told me what a glass of wine means to her.
A glass of wine, initially, when I was younger, was just about flavors and about finding out more about what this very complex and delicious beverage is all about. But as I learned more, reading, learning, taking classes, going through the whole WSET system, getting my diploma Master of Wine, the more I learned, the more it became a real intellectual fascination. And then the next stage was really discovering the great wines of the world. And then it became not just an intellectual discovery, but really an emotional discovery as well. Because great wines touch not just your palate and your mind, it also touches your emotion. And that whole discovery was a journey that continues to really attract me and is endlessly fascinating.
Jeannie Cho Lee won the International Civiltà del Vino Award in 2019.
Of course, I was truly honored, felt slightly overwhelmed that the Masi Prize for the culture of wine was awarded to me in 2019, given how many prominent and very important people in the industry were also awarded and recognized by the Masi Prize. So I felt truly honored. And it was really a moment for me to realize that there are foundations and also wineries, the Boscaini family, who really tries to give back to the industry by acknowledging, recognizing those who work around the world for wine and and love this beverage and share their passion with their markets and the rest of the world. So I think the first emotion was feeling very honored and privileged, and the entire evening, as well as the ceremony, was a very emotional period and time for me. It was a wonderful evening.
It's a virtuous circle for Masi. The more they give awards, the richer the value of their work.
A company that finds a balance between culture and business is a company that goes straight to the top. In a way, it's like being part of an elite. The others make their products to make money, of course. It's natural and it's obvious. Entrepreneurs always try to make their companies bigger and bigger. But it's culture that differentiates you from the others. It's an elite of generous people, people who acknowledge what their land gave to them, people who are willing to give back because they got so much from their motherland, from nature itself, and from all the various circumstances.
Ma dalla natura stessa anche, dall'ambiente dove sei nato, eccetera. Questo l'ho memorizzato io.
This is something I live by, and my children live by it too, because it makes you feel so much better. Also, it's very important from an entrepreneurial point of view, because you give a strong message to your employees and your collaborators. I mean, they're not merely working for a company.
Collaboratori.
They're working for a higher ideal, for a more broad-minded way to see things. It's empowering and valuable for them. When we talk about Veneto and Civiltà Veneta, we're not talking about a vague notion, an elusive idea or an administrative concept. We're talking about culture. We're talking about a well-established cultural system. We're talking about our past, present, and future. We're talking about a land where your parents lived, where your grandparents lived, where your children will live. We're talking about values.
Per cui parli di elementi, diciamo, valoriali.
And the focus of the company on culture and its territory goes even further, with the active contribution to a project involving an iconic monument in the Veneto region, the 67 Pillars of the Verona Arena.
It
all started during the pandemic. The Verona Arena and its foundation went through a very hard time, a crisis, like many other institutions in show business. So these families from Verona decided to stick together, to come together to support the arena in those difficult days and to help such an iconic symbol of their town, one of the symbols of their Made in Italy all over the world. And these families became the so-called 67 Pillars of the Verona Arena. This is an ongoing project and our foundation is actively invested in it.
Ed è un progetto che va avanti ancora adesso e quindi continua questo sostegno alla fondazione.
This episode is over. However, we must not forget where we started: the culture of the land and of the vineyard. In the next episode, I'm going to tell you about the history of the Osaleta, a grape that was thought to be long gone and was rediscovered by none other than Sandro Boscaini himself.